On March 17, 2017, Makayla Chang, who was at Tim Hortons cafe with her friends the day before, disappears without a trace in Nanaimo, Canada. After a couple days, the girl appeared several times on social media and then there was silence. Detectives immediately began searching for Makayla. However, after 2 months, hopes for a happy ending to the story were dashed. Makayla Chang was born on March 1, 2001, in Nanaimo, located on Vancouver Island, British Columbia, Canada, where her childhood and adolescence also took place. The girl, known to friends and family as Kay, was the daughter of Carrie Chang and G9 voter, but was left in the care of her grandmother, Dolly Chang, who became the legal guardian of her granddaughter at an early age due to her parents' drug addiction problems. In addition, Carrie had been incarcerated multiple times, which was known from media reports. Makayla had 2 older half-brothers. Also, about 4 years before she was born, her parents lost Jirish to sudden infant death syndrome in 2016. Makayla changed schools 3 times. Her grandmother recalls that at the last middle school she enrolled her in, the girl only showed up on the first day because someone had hurt her and she didn't want to go back. To her friends, Makayla was a girl who was into music and loved to sing. She also had a tendency to change her hair color and experiment with wigs. Makayla was a happy, fun-loving, and very creative teenager, which was reflected in the way she dressed. In the summer of 2016, the girl met a man named Stephen Michael Bacon at Tim Hortons coffee shop located on Wallace Street in downtown Nanaimo, which she frequented. From that moment on, a bond developed between the two, which according to people close to the couple resembled the kind of bond that can exist between a father and daughter. Stephen, who was born in 1964 and therefore 3 times older than Makayla, had a criminal record for sexual harassment, fraud, and violence committed in the 80th and 90th. The man gave the girl high-heeled shoes, dresses, alcoholic beverages, and other gifts. He even considered legally adopting his young friend, for which he came up with a whole web of deception and manipulation. The 53-year-old man told Makayla a false story. Stephen told her that it was an opportunity for him to redeem himself after his own daughter Allison Bacon died. Well, the reality was that Stephen's daughter was alive. And then came the spring of 2017, a time when Makayla began to drift away from her family and run away from school more often. She spent most of her time with Stephen, and although she often stayed at his house, she would tell Dolly that she was with other friends. According to her grandmother, when Makayla was about to turn 16, she began saying that once she reached that age, she would do what she wanted and decide who she wanted to live with. Stephen's idea to adopt the girl was not just talk, as he even communicated with the girl's grandmother about it and with the Ministry of Children and Family Services. Dolly found it creepy that this man was intruding into her granddaughter's life and she opposed his application for adoption. Makayla didn't agree with that prospect either, and shortly before her 16th birthday, she told Stephen that she didn't want him to adopt her, which led to conflict between them. But that wasn't the only thing that caused them to disagree. Makayla's late-night outings with friends also caused quarrels. It was her tardiness that led to conflict via text messages between the night of Thursday, March 16th, and the early morning of Friday, March 17th. On that day, as on many others, Makayla was at Tim Hortons cafe with her friends, including Kyle McKinnon, a young man with whom she had developed a romantic relationship. Also was with her that night and gave her a ride home Stephen after midnight. After that, no one but Stephen saw her again. The last time Dolly had seen her granddaughter was 5 days earlier, on March 12th, when she took her to a friend's house, though she had heard from her on the 19th of the same month, but then there was silence. When the hours of no news of Macaulay turned into days, she went in search of her. Although the girl had become distant, this absence was unprecedented. The grief-stricken grandmother went to Tim Hortons cafe and talked to her teenage friends. They told her that Stephen had also been looking for her at the cafe. On March 22nd, Dolly went to file a report at the police station, where she met Stephen, who had also come to report the girl missing. The lack of communication with Makayla through messages and her inactivity on social media alerted her family and friends as she was constantly online and updating her content. Detectives immediately began searching for the teen. Initially, the search for Makayla was centered at Gloridum Park in Nanaimo. In addition, searchers repeatedly searched Stephen's home on Bruce Street, and in one instance, their attention was focused on garbage in a nearby vacant lot. Nanaimo police spokesman Gary O'Brien said at the time, because of the long lack of news about the girl and the circumstances surrounding her disappearance, they did not rule out Makayla being the victim of a criminal act. Authorities suspected that Stephen might be with the missing teenager or have knowledge of her whereabouts. Consequently, information was requested from the public regarding Stephen's whereabouts. Although he was not declared a suspect at the time, police only considered him a friend of the girl. Makayla's description: a young girl approximately 165 centimeters tall and weighing about 50 kilograms with short red hair and lip piercings. She reportedly wore glasses and sometimes wore a wig. As for Stephen, he was a man who was 180 centimeters tall and weighed about 165 kilograms with short white hair and a thick white beard. He also had a teardrop tattoo under his left eye and another on the back of his right hand. In an interview with the newspaper while authorities were still trying to locate her granddaughter, Dolly spoke about Stephen. She stated that his relationship with Makayla was inappropriate and that she believes he took advantage of the teen. Dolly also shared the contents of letters Stephen had written to the girl in which he called her "my darling birdie" and spoke of her as his dearest person, comparing his happiness at her presence to what he would feel for his own daughter. The grandmother noted with regret that 8 months ago she had complained to the Nanaimo police about the man, but was told that nothing could be done. At the time of Makayla's disappearance, her father was in jail on charges of possession of a firearm and using a vehicle without the owner's permission. Testifying by phone from the Vancouver Island Regional Correctional Center, he said he felt helpless about not being able to participate in the search for his daughter. He also stated that he was sure if he had been out, he would have been able to protect her. Stephen's daughter, Allison, was also questioned by members of the press during the investigation. She revealed that she had not been in contact with her father for the past 2 years and expressed concern about his mental state. Among other things, she said she learned that he used the nickname Birdie to refer to Makayla, the same nickname he used to call her. According to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, its officers were trying to determine whether Makayla might have traveled with Stephen. However, that line of investigation was eventually dropped. Later that month, officers were able to speak with Stephen in Sudbury, Ontario, but they did not have enough evidence to take him into custody. Since the news of Makayla's disappearance came to light, the community has been on edge and has been closely following news on the case. Relatives, friends, and the public hoped that the girl would be found alive, but unfortunately, hopes for a happy ending to this story were soon dashed. On May 19, 2017, police made a tragic announcement that no one wanted to hear. Makayla's body was found in a rural area south of Nanaimo. According to authorities, everything pointed to her being the victim of a crime. Makayla was lying in a shallow grave in a fetal position on her left side, surrounded and covered by several rocks. She was wearing a sweater or sweatshirt, but her lower body was not covered by anything. A cigarette matching the brand that Stephen had been smoking was found next to her. Other items were also found nearby, including a black flashlight and a black cotton t-shirt. Genetic tests on these items showed that they matched Stephen's DNA. When it was learned that Makayla had been found dead, her friends and other community members gathered to honor her memory. In March 2018, when the girl turned 17, her grandmother stated that she preferred to focus on how her granddaughter lived rather than how she died. On the other hand, friends and classmates also gathered to pay tribute to her. At that time, authorities had still not found the person responsible for Makayla's tragic death, and a year later, the situation has not changed. That's why Kerry, on the eve of March 1, 2019, when his daughter would have turned 18, asked the public and anyone who might have valuable information to cooperate with authorities. He also expressed the family's fear that the crime against his daughter would become an unsolved case. A few months later, in August 2019, Nanaimo police expressed interest in speaking with Stephen again. It later emerged that in September of that year, he was arrested in a case unrelated to Makayla's crime on the other side of the country. Some reports say he was arrested in the state capital of New Brunswick, while others claim he was arrested in Thunder Bay, Ontario. It was at this second location that he was detained until he was transferred to British Columbia in September 2020. Stephen was charged with 1 count of first-degree murder in connection with the Makayla case. A month later, Stephen appeared in Nanaimo court via video link and pleaded not guilty to the charge of first-degree murder of Makayla. Crown Prosecutor Nick Barber subsequently requested the accused be transferred to Nanaimo to appear in person on the charge of the crime against the girl. In November 2021, the first hearing was held in BC Supreme Court to determine whether there was enough evidence against Stephen to bring the case to trial. Although the hearing was scheduled for 5 dates, the accused agreed to have the case go to trial immediately on the same day. Access to the courtroom was denied to the media due to strict COVID-19 protocol. It was also agreed that evidence and witness statements would not be disclosed. Makayla's family members had a very emotional and heartbreaking experience in the courtroom. Janine, the victim's mother, had to leave the courtroom shocked by the evidence presented. The two people who most wanted justice to be served that day were absent from court: Makayla's grandmother, Dolly, who died of cancer on June 1, 2021, and the girl's father, Carrie, who was hospitalized after contracting COVID-19. Makayla's great-aunt, Kelly Borowski, said it felt heartbreaking, not only for the loss of the teenager 4 years earlier, but also for the loss of her sister, Dolly, who wanted to put a stop to that traumatic period. Toward the end of July 2022, it was reported in the media that Stephen's attorney told the court that his client would change his plea to guilty at the next hearing. And so it happened on August 15th of the same year during the next court hearing. The lawyer stated that his client would plead guilty to a lesser charge of second-degree murder, which also automatically carries a life sentence. However, it is up to the judge to determine the minimum term a prisoner must serve to qualify for parole. On Friday, April 14, 2023, 6 years after the discovery of the remains, Stephen's sentencing hearing was held before the judge pronounced sentence. The Crown prosecutor provided a joint statement from the parties outlining the relationship between the victim and the defendant. In addition, the events that preceded the fatal fate became known. According to the prosecutor's office, Stephen admitted that after Makayla came to his house on the night of March 17th, he pushed the girl in the middle of an argument. When she fell, she hit her head and lost consciousness. The man then moved her to a couch and after a quarter of an hour decided to put pressure on her neck. He did this for about 10 minutes, using only his hands, until he was sure she had stopped breathing. A few hours later, Stephen impersonated Makayla by using her cell phone and accessing her social media accounts to communicate with friends and family. He did this for several days so that no one would suspect anything untoward had happened to her. Then on the morning of March 18th, Stephen and an acquaintance of his, a cab driver named Kenneth Postman who drove a wheelchair-accessible vehicle, drove the body to the woods near Nanaimo, on Lycas Road, where she was buried in a shallow grave. As mentioned above, on March 22nd, he himself went to the police to report Makayla's disappearance. On the same day, in the presence of a police officer, he told the girl's grandmother that he would contact her if he learned anything about her granddaughter. The man then withdrew all the money from his account and traveled the next day from Nanaimo by ferry and then by bus, crossing into Canada from the other side. The prosecutor explained that traces of Stephen's DNA found on Makayla's body indicated that the perpetrator had been intimate with his victim. According to his admission, this was consensual on the same day of the fatal attack. In addition, a toxicology report showed the presence of small amounts of various banned substances in Makayla's system. The prosecution explained that the fact that the girl was a vulnerable teenager who was incapacitated when she was fatally assaulted was an aggravating factor. The prosecutor also added that the offender had the opportunity to change his mind before committing an unnecessary crime. The hearing also featured emotional statements from the victim's parents. Carrie, with tears in his eyes, spoke about how his daughter had an incredible spirit and was eager to help others. He mentioned that he was trying to go on his own in 2020 because of this tragedy and expressed that his only consolation would be that the person who took his daughter from him would be incarcerated. Janine also said that her daughter's death had shattered their family and all her hopes and dreams had crumbled. She also said that after the tragedy, she developed problems with short-term memory and anxiety. During her speech, the mother directly addressed Stephen, reminding him that she had argued with him repeatedly and begged him to stay away from her daughter. The court then heard from the defendant, who admitted in a brief statement that his actions were not excusable and that there was nothing he could do to change the situation. The man added that he disagreed with some of the statements made in court, but wanted to take responsibility for his actions. In the end, Stephen Bacon was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 20 years. The judge stated that Stephen had committed a heinous, cowardly, and cruel act and reached out to Makayla's family and friends to make some clarifications about parole eligibility. While emphasizing that this did not mean that the man would automatically be released within that minimum term, the judge also noted that due to Stephen's age, there was a possibility that he would die in prison. Immediately afterward, the defendant was led out of the courtroom with handcuffs on his hands. There is no doubt that Makayla was a young girl whose cuteness and personality left a mark on the hearts of those who knew her. Her violent end serves as a reminder of the dangers that lie ahead and leaves one feeling that perhaps this outcome could have been avoided if Dolly's complaints had been heeded. Friends, what do you think of this story? Write your opinions in the comments and subscribe to my YouTube.